Hello, everybody, and welcome to this session of the Annual International Forum. My name is Burkhard Hasenpusch. I was with the Crime Prevention Council of Lower Saxony before I retired. And I have the honor and the pleasure of moderating this session. I present to you Betsy, and I'm really curious about your program, but I'm sure you will say a few words about NICRO first and about yourself too. Thank you.
I was asked to introduce myself. I'm Betsy Pierce, the CEO of NICRO. I've been with NICRO for many years. I started as a supervisor in one of the offices and was promoted through the ranks to area manager, later to operation manager, to national operation manager. And then I left NICRO for a period of 2 years and worked in projects where we did youth development. And the youth development was very, very much in line with a lot of technical features and technical platforms. So when I was asked to come back to NICRO and appointed as CEO, I also realized that NICRO needed to come on board with newer and more modern ways of working. And when COVID hit us, it gave us that opportunity to put pens down, to reevaluate what we're doing and how we're doing it, and to come up with a new NICRO. And today we work a lot on technical platforms. Our services to our clients, because we're a social work company, so we do behaviour change programs with clients who have been involved in crime. And many of our clients can do hybrid versions of the program. So if anyone has access to a smartphone or a computer, they can access NICRO's services. South Africa is a very big country, and we've got huge areas that is under-resourced and in rural areas. So it does make our programs accessible to most of the people in South Africa. And it also gives, because we work a lot in prison, in courts at the moment. We started off in prisons, but we work a lot in courts now. Now I will explain just now what we do. And so all the courts also have access to NICRO services because of NICRO being online. Thank you. So let me start with this. Sorry, somebody's going to have to just help me. How do I, on your system? I've just said how nice and technically advanced we are, and now I'm struggling. Oh, here it is. Here it is. Thank you. I've got it. Thank you. I didn't see it this side. I'm Elizabeth Pierce, but called Betsy. And I just wanted to go back. I can't go back. Small one. Maureen Mphaphuli, she's also here. She's my colleague. She's the operations manager of NICRO. And she is the one that is responsible for the quality of services in NICRO. Just a quick background of NICRO. NICRO stands for the National Institute for Crime Prevention and Reintegration of Offenders, but it's such a mouthful that we just call ourselves NICRO. We focus on crime and violence prevention and reducing reoffending. We work a lot with offenders through courts, and we still work in prisons, but not to the huge scale that we used to. So when we work with the programs are all focused on reducing and eliminating reoffending. NICRO was established in 1910. We're one of the largest and longest servicing non-governmental organizations in South Africa. And we've got a rich history in human rights, juvenile justice, and criminal justice reform. In the apartheid years, NICRO was one of the organizations that stood against apartheid and that advocated and lobbied for equal rights. And it's a beautiful history. We've got volumes of that, and I actually thought that's something that we also need to just put out there and show how NICRO assisted in not just changing the political side of South Africa, but also made sure that everybody's rights were looked at and adhered to. NICRO also developed a lot of criminal justice policies and regulations. We started off with community services in South Africa, and it was later legislated and mandated. And so we also did diversion, and that diversion became a formal process, especially in terms of the juvenile justice system. And NICRO also pushed a non-custodial sentencing to a great extent in South Africa. And with pushing it, the product that we got then was diversion for adults. Because although we pushed non-custodial sentencing, the magistrates and judges preferred us to work at a prior point where we would work with people in diversion so that they wouldn't get criminal records, especially in terms of the petty offences that is committed in South Africa. So the biggest proportion of our work at the moment is adult diversion services. We used to do a lot of youth or child diversion services, but that is now a mandate of the government. So although we still work in the child diversion system, our biggest impact is currently on adult diversion. And we can see that it will probably also follow the same process as everything else that NICRO has started. It will in the end become a legislated process, and government will take ownership of it. But now we're already seeing with this in process, the next gap that we're going to start working on is aftercare of offenders, because there's a huge gap in South Africa where offenders are not getting the services and they are all falling back into crime because the recidivism rates goes through the roof. But saying that, there's no proper data to show what the reoffending rates in South Africa is. So that is also something we need to look at when we start concentrating and focusing on aftercare. NICRO identifies and addresses the root causes of crime and helps people to deal successfully with the demands of everyday life and change those behaviours or community conditions that cause problems for individuals, families, communities and societies. To this effect, we do behaviour change programs and enrichment programs with our direct beneficiaries, but we also do a lot of advocacy and lobbying to make sure that the social conditions start changing as well. And together with that, we work on a lot of policy reform. Our services, we've got four main streams. The one is prevention of crime and violence. That is within the communities, and that also includes research, advocacy and lobbying, and working in the schools as well as communities. We provide effective early support to people in conflict with the law. That's our diversion and our non-custodial services. And then we support the successful re-entry of former offenders into society. We've already started in aftercare and support services to ex-offenders or offenders released from prison. And then we also promote healthy lifestyles and personal development in individuals and groups. Here we do a lot of work in companies and corporates, where we do wellness programs for the staff of corporates and mental health support. Now, if we get to our road safety and how we landed in road safety, the Sustainable Development Goals, there's a universal call to action to end poverty, protect the planet, ensure that all people enjoy peace and prosperity. And in 2030, the road safety was expressively included in the SDG as an important sustainable development issue that notes a reduction of global deaths and injuries from road traffic accidents. So that is our basis that we started off there. The reality of our South African roads. I only have the statistics for 2020, but in that year, so it's just before, it was the year of COVID, that 12,956 South Africans lost their lives on the roads and at a cost of 176 billion rand. And we are a country that does not have resources to waste. We need these resources to address the inequality of our country. Deadly crashes from alcohol consumption cost the economy 18.2 billion. Over 1 million accidents resulting in vehicle repairs, and they are of about 26.4 billion. 26 of every 100,000 people die on our roads, far above the global average of 18 per 100,000. And we find that the young breadwinners aged 20 to 34 are the leading victims of road accidents and fatalities. Over 60% of road accidents in South Africa are caused by drunk driving, and 94,273 arrests nationally in 2020 for DUI, for drunk driving, recorded by our police services. And our research showed that the causes of road accidents in South Africa is 10% of the accidents are caused by road and environment, that's 6%, and vehicle factors, which is only 4%. But human behavior contributes to 90% of all our road accidents. And this includes drivers and pedestrians being under the influence of alcohol or other substances, distracted or negligent and reckless. And other factors is the driver training, the driver self-discipline, self-regulation, the general attitude of drivers on our roads, and also towards law compliance. I arrived in Germany on Saturday morning. Saturday afternoon, actually, we were in Amsterdam on Saturday morning, and I rented a vehicle. Now, we used to driving on the left-hand side of the road, so it was quite something for me to get to the right-hand side. And I was worried because in my experience on our South African roads, I could have been in trouble driving on the other side of the road, and I'm not used to that. But my experience driving from Munich to Mannheim is that people here have respect for the law. When the speed limit was reduced, everybody slowed down. When the speed limit was upped, people would go faster. I only saw 2 drivers the whole time that could have been South African drivers because they were impatient and they were weaving. But the rest of the traffic flowed beautifully and everybody did what they were supposed to do. So it was really a pleasant drive, and it made me think of our South Africans when we say one of the factors is their attitude towards law compliance. It's really true. We've got a huge issue there at the moment. And when I go through the program now, NICRO's program includes traffic officers. So when we do the presentation and we have our clients in the program, there's one session that is done by the traffic officers. And we've realized that is a huge benefit doing that, because at the end of it, and I'll show you the statistics as well, it shows that people's attitude towards law enforcement improves drastically because they had an opportunity to talk to each other and had an opportunity to see why it is necessary to keep to traffic rules and what is their responsibility as a road user and what is the responsibility of the traffic officers. So it's just interesting. I just needed to note that I can see the difference in our 2 countries in terms of compliance to road safety rules. In South Africa, again, our biggest cause of drunken driving is the Greater Street, and we've got huge problems around that. Our research also indicated that at least 50% of people who die on the roads have a blood alcohol concentration above the legal limit, and that 58% of fatal accidents each year is alcohol related. So South Africa has the highest DUI-related deaths in the world. And that's something that we really have to work against. And it's also very interesting that a lot of the alcohol and producers They actually have approached NICRO during the last 2 years, and we are rendering programs with funding from them. So it is part of their CSI, and what they love to tell us is that they cannot be held responsible for people drinking too much and being on the road, because nobody holds anybody responsible for killings if they're making knives, if they're manufacturing knives. And I thought that's a little bit of a naive lookout, but what we are promoting is a zero tolerance. When you drive, no drinking. Because that is, we're not saying to people stop drinking, but if you drive, no drinking. Okay, now solution, in partnership with our national prosecuting authority through the courts and our road safety units in South Africa, NICRO developed an intervention program, Shifting Gears, to change driving attitude and behaviour of those individuals that was already convicted or arrested for road traffic offences. So that's where the program started. And 5 years into this program, and due to the benefits experienced by participants and their suggestions, we actually looked at starting a preventative program. And then Choosing the High Road started with that. Choosing the High Road, we are it's offered to taxi and bus drivers, courier and delivery businesses, etc. And both programs are offered as face-to-face interventions as well as online programs. Now, I don't know if anybody here, I've got a lot of South Africans here in front of me, but anybody else, have you ever heard of South Africa's taxi drivers and taxi industry? It just would be interesting to know. Well, they are law unto themselves. They will make a road where there is no road, or even go past on the pavements, on the sidewalks, to get to where they want to go. And it's quite an achievement for us to be able to access that group and have them agree to come into our programs. We understand that people generally do not learn effectively or change their behaviour through punishment or fines, as punishment often drive people to find alternative ways to achieve their desired outcome. And we also found with this program, a lot of people who are referred to us are from the higher social levels. So it's people with money. So if someone has a fine, it means nothing. It's easy to pay a fine, and it doesn't change the behaviour, because they are prepared and willing to pay that fine and still speed on the roads or drive under the influence. So this is what we also promote in the courts, that only behaviour change programs will make people think and stop and do something different. Punishment doesn't have that effect. So we address their motivation and get them to change intrinsically instead of changing to avoid a punishment. We give them information that they understand, they assimilate the knowledge, and then they can use that knowledge and apply it to change behaviour. Right, this is our process. All people who are referred through courts, we do an assessment, individual planning with them, and we've got the IDP, so individual planning with each person. The intervention in this case takes 6 sessions, 6 2.5-hour sessions. Then we review and evaluate, and the review and evaluate comes from both sides, from the participant side as well as from NICRO side. So we are looking at his progress. And we've got pre-test and post-test. So just after the planning, they do a pre-test. After the 6 sessions, they do a post-test so that we can evaluate the learning and some of the attitude and mindset changes. But then we also have a follow-up over a year, where we call it tracking, 3 months, 6 months, and 12 months. We follow up with them and with families where we do interviews, surveys, and more evaluation forms to see where they're at. And we also go and check the criminal records to see if there's any further offences, and that we use as our data to look at the progress of this program. And we often have to also write the feedback reports to court, so we've got a lot of qualitative and quantitative data on these clients, which we use. Everything is then used in the research. And this program is normally for offenders through courts, but we also have it for drivers who have been in a disciplinary action through their work, where there was some issues with vehicles and driving, and sometimes even people who have a problem with alcohol, even though they were not caught driving under the influence, their employers will often refer them to us for assistance as well. The other program is the same, more or less. It's just a shorter one. We don't have 3 sessions in over 3 weeks. The other one is 6 sessions over 6 weeks. This one is 3 sessions in a workshop format, and it's the preventative one. It's normally for learner drivers, but it can be for any other drivers and employers. We've got employers here because the employers will refer their employees to us, the drivers. Now, how it works. Before I explain this a little bit, we've got a psychologist here that can explain it much better than I can. But I just want to give you a bit of an example of how this works, because the way you think influences the way you feel and the way you will react. So if I am driving, I told you a little bit about the taxis, but you won't understand it if you haven't driven on a South African road. So you really need to come and visit us. If I'm on the road and there's a taxi driver and this taxi swerves in front of me, and I think, oh my gosh, just one of those taxi drivers again that is trying to write everybody in front of him off, and I get angry with him and I hoot, and I have got road rage and I swerve past him and I get in front of him again. That's because I thought of this guy as being a big clot. You know, he's not obeying the rules, he's inconsiderate, and he is putting everybody else's life in danger. But now I'm so angry, I'm doing the same. But if a taxi swerves in front of me, and I might see, but there's a pregnant woman there, and I think, shoo, that poor woman is in labor. What do? I immediately hold back, I let him get past because he needs to get this woman to the hospital. I'm not angry, I'm calm, I've got compassion for him, and I'm thinking, let him get ahead because he needs to get her to the hospital. So it's just nothing changed in this whole scenario. It's just the way I saw it, and what I'm thinking will influence how I'm behaving towards towards that person on the road. So that's a quick example of how you get angry on the road, or you can be calm on the road. And what we teach our clients to do the same thing. But this is in a broader way. Here we say we give them information, because a lot of people don't understand all the risks that they are causing by not complying to the rules. So we give them all of that. We give them statistics on how many people are killed on the roads. We do show them videos sometimes, and we'll give them a lot of information, and that normally comes from the traffic officers' side as well, on what they've experienced on the roads in South Africa. And then we will, after giving them all this information, we will start challenging their thinking. We'll see, but where did your behavior come from? Where does your thinking come from? What is it based on? Are you driving like your father used to drive? Is that your role model? Are you following that? Your attitude to other road users on the road? We often hear people say, in South Africa, we've got a lot of big big vehicles on the road, 4x4 vehicles on our tar roads. And we often say, but that guy in the big vehicle thinks he owns the road. And that the smaller vehicles or older vehicles will almost be pushed off the road. They flash for you, pull off the road because I want to get past you. They won't pass you. They can, but they won't. They flash the light. So where did that person's entitlement come from, that he's got the only right of way on the roads? So those type of things we start challenging. And once we've challenged that, we will see that people start thinking and they reflect on their own behavior, and then they assimilate the information into where they want to go. And that's when they start changing their behavior on the roads as well. So that's just a very simplified way of how it works. Here, I'm not going to go through the whole program, how it works. It's, we do provide the space for them to reflect. We give them a lot of information. We identify where these patterns come from. And then we look to develop responsible driving skills, such as how do you calm yourself down in traffic, and we use all these proper communication, relationship skills, emotional regulation, self-reflection, so that people can start thinking what they're doing when they're driving. What are they thinking before they start feeling and doing? And then we assist them to internalize what they have learned. And throughout of this whole process, they need to take responsibility for their learning and reflect on their own actions. Because if they don't acknowledge that what they did was wrong, they cannot fix what they've done. We find a lot of people, when they arrive in our office, they are so angry with law enforcement because it wasn't their fault, it's law enforcement. And then they're angry about how they were arrested. So that becomes a big issue. So normally our first session is debriefing, because that is what comes to the fore as well, is how they were arrested. And how that made them feel. But then we start working through that and get to their own actions and let them take responsibility for their own actions. And then here, lastly, we do monitor what they are, the internalized part of the learning, because we do measure it later on, and following it up on all these 3, 6, and 12 months. And when anybody needs additional services, they come back into our services. So it's not a one, if there is anything else they need to do, they will get those services, because NICRO has got a lot of other programs as well. This is what our long-term, our research on our long-term program impact. It was a 5-year period that we looked at. Our beneficiaries, the demographics, 89% were male, 11% female, and that's just, I think it's just a representation of our South African drivers, more or less, and how people drive, because it's a very male-orientated thing. If a family drives, it's normally the husband that drives. And during for this research, we had 6,636 respondents, and of that, reckless and negligent driving charges, 59% was charged with that, 36% with drunken driving, and 5% with both. 97% were first-time offenders, and 75% of them was earning an income, and that's very relevant, because our clients. Normally, we've got about 67% of our normal client base is unemployed. So it's quite relevant to see this. This is the upper, and it's also not low salaries. It's normally quite high. And the fact that it's 97% first-time offenders doesn't necessarily say they've never driven drunk prior to this. It's their first arrest. But when people have no criminal record yet, they've got so much to lose, because this is very successful. And I believe it's because they don't have a criminal record yet, because they have been stopped. They can think what has happened. It's a huge thing, and they can prevent a criminal record. If they don't turn around and turn their lives around here and they go further down that road, they now realize it's more in their face of what could happen to them when they've got a criminal record, because we explain to them what's the consequences of a criminal record. We had a lawyer. After he won a case, he and his client went and had lunch and had a drink, and he was pulled off, and he was under the influence. And charged with drunken driving. And he also said he just realized this was such a wake-up call, because he realized he could have lost everything. He would not have been able to practice if he had a criminal record. And he's a big promoter of our program, but not just of our program, of Don't Drink and Drive. This just shows the long-term program impact on improved understanding. And you'll see it had a very strong influence on most of the clients here in terms of their responsibilities as a road user, road offences in the law, effects of alcohol and driving, effects of driving under alcohol, effects of driving under the influence. Sorry, that's both effects of alcohol driving. That's wrong, sorry. The other one, it should just have been the effects of driving under the influence and effects of reckless and negligent driving. So this is the improved understanding after information was given. This is the application of the learning, where people are now starting to assimilate the learning, and they avoid situations where drugs or alcohol may be present. And but most of them avoid also drinking after using substances. The others that did still drink said, but they only had one when they were still under the alcohol levels, blood alcohol levels. This is the long-term impact on their positive driving behaviour, while giving way to others, wearing seatbelts, obeying road signs, and stopping at red traffic lights and pedestrian crossings. And you would think everybody does it, but it doesn't happen naturally. And here, this one is refraining from negative driving behavior, where people here also, you can see the majority of them will always refrain from exceeding speed limit, overtaking vehicles on solid lines, etc., etc. And this is just a simulation and a summary. We've had a 97% success rate where there were no new offences or arrests over a 5-year period. And 2% of the arrests that did take place here was not for driving offences, it was different things. But here also we had a huge decrease in drunk driving of the cohort that we did research on. The speeding decreased, the reckless driving the street, and the distracted driving decreased. But it also had a broader impact, which was an unintended impact, but it was a very good one, where there was improved relationships with law enforcement, because it wasn't designed for that, but we found it was improved, where there was improved relationships at work as well as in the family. And then we have had fantastic stakeholder feedback, where the Director of Road Safety Management said that this is a very creative form of justice, and it gives people a chance to reflect on their wrongdoing. We also had from I'm just going to go through this one, from one of the advocates there, that's also, and that is very important for us, because it's not, unfortunately, it's not all the advocates in all the provinces that sees or that uses this program. And where we've got this good stakeholder feedback, we are busy working with our national prosecuting authority so that they can look at it to implement it everywhere in South Africa. But it's seen in a very good light. Then we've got a little bit of our what participants say. You know, and it's very important if we see NICRO has changed my way of thinking, and it will have an everlasting effect on me. And that doesn't, as I said, it's wider than just looking at the behavior on the roads. It's behavior everywhere that has changed, because people have learned to reflect on what they're doing. Okay, I've got more of that. And also that people, it's very important. A lot of people said that they'll never drink and drive again. They're using the Ubers because they're still going to parties. They're not stopping that, but they will not drive once they've had one drink. Because the problem is with that is you never know what your blood alcohol level will be because it depends on your size, it depends on your not really on what you ate, because people, that's a fallacy. People think if they eat and drink, it's not going to affect them. It actually does. But it's on your gender, because women metabolizes alcohol differently. We can drink less than men to get to the same blood alcohol level. Your physique, everything. So it's very difficult to say. If you drink one little drink, you're under the limit. You wouldn't know. All right. That's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Betsy, for your very encouraging presentation.